As we talk about the issue of violence, we'll be talking about preparations of relevant agencies. Joining me is INEC National Commissioner and Acting Chairman as we speak, Prince Solomon Shoyabi joins us in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Let me quickly start with the issue of the rerun election, especially the ones held yesterday by Bayelsa and Abia. There was a confusion in Abia State where the returning officer K had announced an inconclusive election, but he was asked to go back and re-announce a result again. Why did this kind of confusion come within the ranks of INEC?
Let me assure you of one thing. First of all, let me correct one impression. I'm not the acting chairman of INEC. I was acting way back in 2010.
But I understand that the national chairman is not around.
He's around.
Oh, he's back.
He's around. He never even went anywhere.
Okay.
Now, let me just say this. There was only one announcement in Abia State. There will be speculations, there will be agitations, but I want to assure you there was only one declaration and only one return, and there was never a change in the return that was made in Abia State. The same thing went for the two rerun elections in Bayelsa. They were conclusive elections. You see, what is happening is that people are now trying to inject a lot of rules, their own rules, into the electoral process by telling us, by declaring results before a final pronouncement is made. Don't forget that this is a rerun election. It is not a general election. The guidelines that will guide them are definitely different. In the case of Abia State, it's a whole senatorial district. In Bayelsa, they were partial elections. And people still want to inject the rules that will guide the general elections on this. I want to assure you that the pronouncements that were made, the only one pronouncement was made in Abia, and that was the declaration that was made.
Okay, because what happened, like my colleague was covering that incident, because we've understood that there was a declaration of inconclusive process earlier on where they said the figures between Onhabua and Ojikalu was not, the difference was higher than the cancelled vote, or the cancelled votes were higher than the difference between both men who are the winner and the runner-up. So they said at some point, the INEC official said, look, there are no inconclusiveness in a rerun election. Is that true?
That is true.
So you cannot have...
I want you to look at the constitution of this country. This issue of inconclusiveness is just our own guidelines to ensure that nobody is disenfranchised in any election. What the law really says is majority in most cases and absolute compliance. That's the Constitution. But in the case of inconclusiveness, it always applies to these general elections. Or if care is not taken, this could go on for about 4 different layers, and you keep on talking about inconclusiveness. It happened. I want to give you a scenario about Kogi, which started. That was a general election. It was inconclusive. The second one, people now talked about inconclusiveness again. Very nicely, we are talking about violence. People are now trying to use violence to disrupt elections in places where you have very high voter registration figures. And then they would now come around and talk about inconclusiveness. Let me give you an example about what happened in Kogi. There was conclusion of an election. There was collation at a polling booth. There was collation somewhere, but the result was hijacked somewhere along the line. How can you cancel an election on the road due to violence, an election that had been concluded? Now, the parties involved will now come around and talk to you about inconclusiveness because that result had been hijacked. I'm not in full facts of what happened in Abia, but I want to assure you that if you look at it, the scenario will not be different.
Well, because a lot of people will be wondering, the new leadership of INEC came into place, and the two major first elections conducted by INEC were declared inconclusive, Kogi and Bayelsa elections. So one will be wondering, what is wrong in the new setup of INEC?
No, there's nothing wrong. There is one thing you must appreciate now. The elections are getting better.
Is that the reason why we are seeing
there is
inconclusiveness?
close competition. The days of this landslide is gone. You will see that the results as you see them are very, very close. Look at Kogi, for instance. The difference between the first election we did was about 51,000. In the previous election, it was about 400 and something thousand. In Bayelsa, it was about the same margin. So we really want to make sure that at least the elections themselves are thorough and it reflects the true desire and then the true reflection of the wishes of the people.
Does it mean that the elections in the past were not thorough under Jega? That's why they were not declared inconclusive?
No.
Because one would be inclusive.
As a matter of fact, this will be,
why
the Kogi election will be the 5th inconclusive election we'll have in the country.
I know we've seen situations in Anambra and some other states.
Two in Abia, two in Imo.
Yes.
The first inconclusive election even started in Imo.
Imo states.
We had about 6 before this general election, which we had in Kogi. It was just so that these two followed each other. I'll be back to back.
But one will be wondering, why is it that it is a Professor Yakubu-led leadership that is very first elections inconclusive?
In totality, elections are now being conducted at least the way they should be conducted. Number one, you are talking about inconclusiveness. Nobody has ever faulted that process. Nobody has talked. We are not talking about ballot stuffing or figures being written somewhere. The thoroughness, whenever you have a very keen election, I'm telling you, you must be very, very thorough in your operations.
Right. Let me ask you, talking about thoroughness now,
yes.
The issue of card readers now, there has been a debate during the election tribunal up onto Supreme Court about the use of card readers and some other devices INEC invented into the electoral process. But then where are we on this card reader? Is INEC pushing the case of the card reader and the PVC for it to be included in our electoral act?
In fact, if you ask majority of Nigerians, they would tell you that the best thing that ever happened to the 2015 elections were the card readers. Let us start from that point. Now let us forget about the way we're pushing it because it's not favorable to some people. The card reader is not good. The card reader is the best thing that has happened to this process. I want to assure you that this card reader has come to stay. As you rightly guessed or as you rightly asked, we are going to push. It's in the law, but we are going to concretize it further.
It's not in the electoral act.
It doesn't have.
It's in your guidelines.
It's in our guidelines. Our guidelines too are laws.
But
they are laws.
But they didn't
the Constitution empowers us.
But Mr. Shoebi, your guidelines didn't stand the test of time in the courts.
I'm telling you, it's true in some cases.
In which give us cases where.
Anyway, don't let us go into this.
No. Nigerians want to know. Just a moment.
I don't want to really.
Mr. Shoebi, just a moment. Tell me the fate of the card readers from the outcome of the Supreme Court cases that we've seen.
In some cases, some of the courts, because I'm not a lawyer and our legal department will tell you this conclusively, it was not admissible. In some places, it was admissible in some cases. That it did not matter in some cases, it mattered in some cases.
Why will it not? Why will it not?
Well,
that's a big question because if you devised it for our process to go on, I won't be wondering that it should be statutory.
Definitely, all I can tell you is that the Constitution, not even the Electoral Act, empowers us to make guidelines, which we review from time to time.
Are you bothered that the card readers didn't scale through at some point in the Supreme Court cases?
Naturally, anybody who loves this country will be bothered, not just me alone.
I'm talking about the commission. I'm talking about the commission.
Is bothered because this is something which was hailed immediately after the election as the best thing that has happened, that this card reader has led a lot of credence to this election. And any other thing, I mean, it's the wish of the Nigerians that is so important and is so paramount to us.